Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 17th of October of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And the most important probably updates of today are coming from the city by the name of Berdyansk, the city that located on the south of Zaporozhye area, on the west of Mariupol and on the east of Melitopol. The Russian sources are saying, and the Ukrainian sources confirm this information, that as a result of missile strike, the Ukrainians managed to deal significant damage to the Russian airfield that located on the north on the top of Berdyansk, and as a result of that strike, the Russians lost significant number of helicopters. Currently nobody knows and nobody provided us, at least official sources haven't provided us any information regarding the number of helicopters that were destroyed, regarding the ammo depots and so on, but I expect that soon the Western sources will publish the satellite photos of this area, and then we will be able to calculate the number of helicopters that were destroyed. Later, we got another very interesting piece of news regarding that attack. According to the Russian sources and the Ukrainian sources, that attack the Ukrainians made using the ATACMS missiles that the United States of America have sent to the Ukraine recently. And the Russians, when talking about the Russian sources, they sent some investigators who made their own investigation, and they managed to collect the parts of that missile around the airfield, and they managed made the conclusion that that was ATACMS missile. Later, Zelensky himself, the president of Ukraine, made a special video about that, and he thanked the United States of America that they sent them this type of weapon, ATACMS. He told that the agreements between the United States of America and Ukraine work, and he told that ATACMS work as well. So basically, Zelensky confirmed that the Ukrainians, for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, used ATACMS missiles against the Russian positions. Later, we got more updates regarding the results of attacks, not like the results, but consequences of the attack. We see a lot of explosions, we see a lot of fire points, we see a helicopter. It's very difficult to understand whether this exact helicopter was damaged or not, but I believe that soon we're going to receive some numbers one more time and satellite pictures. The question I have, and the question that we need to ask ourselves, why the Ukrainians took a decision to use this type of weapon exactly right now. Because we see that the Russian air defense missed that type of weapon, but after that attack, after that launch, the Russians obviously will find a solution, antidote, how to shut down this type of weapon as well. Of course, it's not going to happen tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, but probably within 2 weeks the Russians will find a solution. Within a month, the Russians will be able to shut down up to 60-70% of this type of weapon. Within half a year, the Russians will shut down probably 95% of this type of weapon. Even less, even in less time. It's not even half a year, but 2 or 3 months. We saw the same story when talking about Storm Shadow and HIMARS. At first phase of special operation, the Ukrainians managed to destroy a significant number of Russian forces positions, but now almost every single missile of HIMARS or Storm Shadow type was shut down by the Russians, currently can be shut down by the Russians as well. So the Ukrainians use ATACMS. So basically the Ukrainians have a small window of opportunities, up to 2 weeks. During these 2 weeks, they can do whatever they can, whatever they like, using this ATACMS, using offensive operation. Another important thing, that as a result of that attack, the Ukrainians damaged significant number of Ka-52 helicopters. The helicopters that destroyed significant number of Ukrainian armored vehicles in Bradley Square and Vremivka. We remember the scenes and the videos that were published by the Ministry of Defense during the clashes for Vremivka tactical bridgehead and Rabotina, how the Russian helicopters Ka-52 using missiles Lmur and Vikhr destroyed a lot of Ukrainian tanks, Bradleys and Strikers and Leopards, and now the airfield where the Ukrainians concentrated those helicopters were destroyed, probably with helicopters. One more time, significant few weeks of windows of opportunity for the Ukrainians. They can attack because they know for sure that the Russians will not concentrate and collect helicopters really close to the combat line. Obviously, the Russians will be forced to stretch them and so on until they find the solution. So that was the reason of attack. The only reason of attack using ATACMS missile against the Russian position is that Ukrainians are going to launch another offensive operation this night, upcoming night, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, within the next 48 hours. If the Ukrainians are not going to launch any offensive operation within the next 48 hours, they waste these ATACMS missiles for free, for nothing, just for very short operational success. The Russians, one more time, will find a solution how to shut them down in 2 weeks, in months, and in a half a year. One more time, in a half a year, every single ATACMS missile will be shot down by the Russian air defense system. Now we are moving to Kherson direction, and currently the attack against the Russian helicopters in Berdyansk also explains the intensifying of Ukrainian activity in Kherson area. As you can see, during the previous 48 hours, the Ukrainians made significant number of FPV drone strikes against the Russian positions. The Ukrainians were attacking everything they could: light vehicles, concentration of forces, radars, communication centers, just ammo depots, just local soldiers walking along the streets. A lot of damage, a lot of fire, a lot of pressure, and we understand that Ukrainians don't have possibilities to make a real artillery preparation as the Russians did in the vicinity of Avdiivka. Yes, the Avdiivka operation, the Russians haven't managed to achieve significant results, but we're talking right now about artillery preparation. The Ukrainians don't have this possibility, and they took a decision to replace the classical artillery preparation with massive FPV drone strikes. It's very difficult to understand whether it's a normal exchange like process, but as I understand, the Ukrainians tried to achieve some success and maybe they managed to do this. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported, for example, that as a result of fierce clashes on Kherson direction, the Ukrainians lost 45 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles and artillery systems. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that they managed to discover the Ukrainian artillery system M777 Howitzer, and as a result of FPV drone strike of Lancet strike, that artillery system was destroyed. And this is exactly the reason why the Ukrainians don't have possibility to launch a normal and classic artillery preparation, because the Russians track, control and destroyed during the previous months every single artillery system that Ukrainians had on Kherson direction. So the only possible solution for them is FPV drones that they can use from hidden positions, from buildings. The only thing you need is to establish radar and to establish something like communication equipment. Furthermore, the sources are saying that Ukrainians during the previous 48 hours launched a lot of attacks, a lot of attempts to cross Dnipro River in many directions. One of the directions was from Pridniprovsk in direction of Pishanovka. As a result of that attack, the Ukrainians managed to redeploy up to 2 squads, 2 groups of Ukrainian stormtroopers of 35th and 36th brigades, not of territory defense brigade, but recently redeployed in this area, 35th, this one 35th brigade, and 36 Marine Brigades. As a result of clashes, the Ukrainians managed to establish or to develop the foothold in this area because they had already created a foothold in this area. Now they try to develop this, but the Russians launched a counter-attack with artillery, with Stoss flamethrower systems, and the Ukrainians were stopped back, and basically they were forced to stop and to not to continue offensive operation anymore. Also, we see concentration of Ukrainian forces in the vicinity of Dacia, and this is the second area of concentration where the Ukrainians will try to continue their offensive operation further in direction of Oleshki. And of course, there is a concentration of Ukrainian forces on this side of Dnipro River in front of Kherson, and the Ukrainians will try to use this territory and this foothold as well to attack Kardashanka, to attack Salantsy, and to attack Oleshki as well. So because of that fact that the Ukrainians destroyed the Russian airfield with Ka-52 and basically they discovered the ATACMS missiles, the timing started. They have around 2 weeks to get some results during this week, during this window of opportunities. So I believe that they will continue offensive operation in Kherson as well. But there is one problem for the Ukrainians. For example, the Russians today published very interesting video that we need to take a look in details, and the Russians reported that they managed to discover the parking of pontoon bridge equipment. A lot of machines, a lot of trucks, probably from Germany, of the engineering equipment to build bridges and pontoon bridges. The Russians managed to discover this like parking, and as a result of missile strike, as you can see in the beginning of this video, it was maybe even not missile, but because, as you can see according to the video, The missile changed its first it was flying from from right to left, and then from left to right. Very interesting missile, very interesting technology. But as a result of that strike, the Ukrainians lost significant parking with significant number of equipment that they were planning to use to build pontoon bridges and for upcoming crossing operation. Very successful attack from the Russian side that probably may ruin some Ukrainian plans regarding offensive operation. The Ukrainians tried to ruin the Russian plans with Ka-52, and the Russians tried to ruin Ukrainian plans with parking with the pontoon bridge equipment. Now we are moving further to Zaporozhye direction, and we got also a lot of very interesting updates and details from this bridgehead. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 110 soldiers, 17 armored vehicles, including 7 tanks and 2 artillery systems. Very heavy clashes, very fierce battles, bloody battles took place on the western edge of Verbove in this area. If you remember, a few days ago, the Russians, as a result of counter-offensive operation, managed to return control over some trenches and some positions on the west of Verbove. So basically, as a result of attack, the Russians established control over this territory, and I have colored this territory in red. And now the Ukrainians, during the previous 24 hours, took a decision or tried to return control over this territory, and for those purposes, they launched significant attack with significant number of armored vehicles, tanks, and infantry, and so on. The Ukrainians were completely defeated. They had significant losses, and they haven't managed to achieve nothing as a result of that attack. The Russian sources published the video of results of that attack, significant number of armored vehicles, but the most important part of this video is that a lot of armored vehicles were destroyed exactly on the edge of Verbove, almost inside Verbove. And this is very interesting, very weird from one side, that as a result, no matter the losses, no matter the situation, as a result of attack, the Ukrainians managed to get at least this part of Verbove, where the main forces were destroyed. Currently, nobody knows who exactly managed to survive, how many Ukrainian forces managed to capture some buildings or trenches, and whether the Ukrainian forces are there or they were completely pushed back and forced back to step back. Nobody knows. So we need more information, and I believe that tomorrow we're going to receive something new updates about this situation. During those attacks, the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian stormtroopers heavily with artillery systems, with TOS flamethrower systems, and so on. So this is another solution, another consequences of Ukrainian usage of ATACMS missile against the Russian helicopters. We remember that the main power, the main force that the Russians were using to destroy Ukrainian armored vehicles in this direction, was Ka-52 helicopters that probably were destroyed as a result of missile strike. And the Ukrainians used this window of opportunity, at least in this direction, and sent a very powerful attack. But at least for today, it didn't help them. A lot of forces were destroyed, a lot of armored vehicles as well. Now we are moving to the Vremivka tactical bridgehead. We got some updates from this territory as well. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of Vorozhaine. We know that Ukrainians have some problems with reserves, and we know, and the Russians know this as well, that the Ukrainians use this territory, use the forces from this territory as a strategic reserve, and some forces from this direction were sent to Kherson. We're talking about Marine brigades. Some forces were sent from this direction in direction of Avdiivka, some reinforcement, and currently there is a lack of forces, and the Russians try to use this window of opportunity for upcoming offensives in this area. For now, the situation have no changes on the ground. Maybe some changes we can see in the vicinity of Priyutina, where the Russians try for probably 4th or 5th day in a row to attack the Ukrainian positions on the north of the city. Now we are moving to Novomikhailivka. Today we got more updates from this territory. The Russians continue their storming operation of Novomikhailivka. For now, the Russians are trying to destroy the Ukrainian stronghold in the south of Novomikhailivka that located along the road between Novomikhailivka and, let's say, Vladimirovka. As a result of artillery strikes and tank strikes, the Russians try to reduce the Ukrainian forces in this area and to force them to step back. we don't have any results of success of those attacks, but we see that the Russians try to keep and to save the pressure against this territory. Also, as a result of FPV drone strike, the Russians managed to discover and destroy another Ukrainian artillery system in the vicinity of Katerinovka. And this is a very interesting video because this is not the first video from the same area. During the previous 2 weeks, the Ukrainians have already redeployed their artillery system in this direction, and as a result of the same Lancet strike, the Ukrainians at least have already lost like 4 or 3 artillery systems in the same area. So this video of today, this is the video of like few weeks ago on 10th of October, and this is the video of 7th of October. So as you can see, along the same tree line, the Ukrainians tried to concentrate their artillery system forces, and the Russians have already destroyed up to 5. We have at least 5 geolocations of destroyed Ukrainian artillery systems in the same area. So nothing changes from day to day. When talking about Avdiivka area, as we discussed in the previous video, the Russians managed to improve their positions on the south of Severna. And Tonenka, the Russians managed to improve their positions on the south of Avdiivka. Currently, the Ukrainians were forced to step back on the north from the railways. The Ukrainians tried to use FPV drones to slow down the Russians' movement and not to allow them to develop their offensive operation further. The situation has been stabilized in this area, but the Russians are saying the situation was stabilized not because of like the Russians were defeated or they're not going to continue offensive operation. The Russians are saying that the situation was stabilized because now they managed to maintain the gray zone, they managed to capture edge positions, and if the Russians want to continue further, they need a better plan, they need to maintain the plan, and they need to, so it's like much more things to do before the next wave of attack. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes in this direction of Donetsk direction, not just in the vicinity of Donetsk but also in the vicinity of Bakhmut, this is the same front line. The Ukrainians lost 485 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. The level of loss of the Ukrainian army is very heavy on this direction, and up to 500 soldiers. We see that there are very heavy clashes, and I believe that soon these clashes and these losses will bring us more updates regarding changes on the ground. Very interesting information are coming from Dubova, Vasilievka, Orekhov, Vasilievka. Very interesting updates that I'm planning to discuss today. If you remember, a few weeks ago we got updated that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish control over entire Orekhov, Vasilievka. But the only thing we got is the Russian soldier passing by some buildings on the south, and we still haven't received even a single video confirmation that the Russians managed to establish control over entire Orekhov, Vasilievka. But today we got at least 3 videos from the same area. The Russians, after a small operational pause, increased their activity, intensified their clashes, and for example, as a result of FPV drone strike on the north of Orekhov, Vasilievka in the vicinity of Zelezhnyanska, the Russians managed to discover the hidden Ukrainian positions, and as a result of FPV drone strike, they managed to destroy another checkpoint of the Ukrainian forces. During the day, the Russians attacked and destroyed and attacked Grigorovka very heavily using like multi-launch rocket systems. You see the Russian carpet bombardment of the city. It's a very powerful attack, probably something like artillery preparation. At least this attack might be considered as the artillery preparation before very powerful offensive operation. But the problem is that if the Russians want to attack Grigorievka, there are of course operational reserves that are located in the vicinity of Markova at least, and today the Russians probably also, meanwhile attacking Grigorovka, the Russians were trying to track the movement and redeployment of Ukrainian forces in their operational areas, and as a result of artillery strike, the Russians managed to destroy some position and concentration of Ukrainian forces, artillery systems in Markova. So that we see that during the previous 36-24 hours, the Russians made at least 3 geolocated attacks in this direction, which usually means that the Russians are planning to launch offensive operation in this area as well. We understand that the main purpose of this possible attack is to establish control over Grigorovka and to establish like the front line and combat line along the canal that goes from Slavyansk to Klishchievka and Andreevka area, something like this. So we'll see, maybe the Russians are able to do this, who knows. So this is the possible Russian plan of attack. and of course the forest between Orekhovo-Vasilivka and Grigorovka. Now we are moving to the north in direction of Kupiansk-Liman area, and today we got also a lot of updates. The Russians published the video of the usage of TOS-2 modernized TOS flamethrower system that can attack for a longer distance, and they're much heavier, have a better equipment, better distance, harder weapon. As a result of strikes, a lot of Ukrainian positions were damaged or even destroyed. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes on Liman direction, the Ukrainians lost 115 soldiers. A very big level of losses in comparison with the previous days, 2 times bigger in comparison with the average losses during the previous days. Also, we got the bombings of Tarskoye salient, so we see intensifying of actions of the Russian forces in this area as well. As I understand, the main clashes are taking place in the vicinity in triangle between Nevskaya, Makeyevka, Plashanka, where the Russians are trying to penetrate Ukraine's defense belt. Currently, they stacked a little bit, but because the Ukrainians have prepared a very powerful defense belt, first the Russians need to crack this nut, and of course it will take time. But more important updates are coming from Kupiansk direction. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 270 soldiers, 14 armored vehicles, including 1 tank, and 4 artillery systems. These are the heaviest losses of the Ukrainian forces on this front line since the beginning of creation of Kupiansk front line. I don't remember such a big number. The Ukrainians lost a lot of forces, not just in the vicinity of Kupiansk, Liman, Perv, and so on. Currently, there are very heavy clashes and very fierce battles in the vicinity of Ivanovka. The Russians are storming the city from 2 directions from the north, trying to bypass the city from the north and to establish control over Stepovo Novoselka. The second direction is from Yahidne to Ivanovka from the south. The Ukrainians try to control the road, the main supply road from Kupiansk to Kislovka-Kotlarovka, and they're trying to attack the Russian positions, the Russian forces from this road. Today we got at least 2 interesting geolocations. One of the geolocations we have already discussed in the previous video, how the Russians established full fire control over the main over the rocket, and the Ukrainians tried to bypass this rocket using a lot of types of vehicles, but as a result of artillery strike, probably a lot of vehicles and were destroyed and left there forever. And the Russians lost at least 1 tank during the offensive operation and during the clashes that are taking place currently in this area. At least 1 geolocated losses. Obviously, there are more losses from both sides, but we see that the Russians are pushing, and the level of losses of the Ukrainian forces are very heavy. So this is that's it for the ground situation. Another important update that we need to discuss is that Putin have arrived to China, and today the comrade Xi has met Putin, and they made a common photo and so on. And this important meeting, we need to understand one thing, that this meeting not about that they're good friends and so on. The main topic is, of course, of these 2 persons was the weapon and situation in Gaza in Ukraine. If you remember, during the previous days, a lot of Muslim leaders, like from, let's say, Iran, Iraq, Palestine, Lebanon, visited Putin, and they discussed something. Obviously, they were talking about Gaza, about Israel, and about Russian weapon. Obviously, they were asking Putin for weapon. Putin can give them everything that they want, obviously, but the only big problem is that Putin doesn't have the production of any missile, let's say, from one small part to the final missile. He doesn't have this possibility. The Russians have technology. The Russians have the final stage of construction. But to create a lot of weapons for Muslim countries in Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, first of all, they need agreement with China regarding production of small parts, of chips, of electronic equipment, and so on. So basically, Putin, during the meetings with Muslim leaders, collected the orders, and then today he arrived in China with a very big invoice, very big invoice. And as I understand, China is going to sign this invoice, and after that, China will start production of small parts and equipment for Russia. Russia will collect and construct a very big weapon, and then this weapon is going to be sent to the Gaza region and to war in Israel. And this is the reason why United States of America took a decision to redeploy another aircraft carrier in this area. Currently there are 2, maybe there are going to be more, and also 4,000 of United States Marines are going to be redeployed also in the vicinity of this area. Obviously the clashes in this direction is going to take place maybe by till the end of this year, and Zelensky understand that this is exactly the time when he needs to start attack, because he needs to show the results or he will be abandoned. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.